little bun that we ate. We got one in the morning, one at noon, one at night. But we didn't do no work. We didn't go out working like we did when we went to Japan. We got in Hong Kong. They had, first of all, they brought the Chinese, was bringing stuff like tea and sugar and some buns on a tray and that. And we were giving our money that we had to the Chinese and give it to them, and then they'd push it through the fence and we'd take it. So there was one time that we were sitting, when we come down from the hills, and I was sitting there and somebody had a $50 bill, and he tore it all up in bits. He says, "This is no good to me," and he tore it all up in like a jigsaw puzzle, and he threw it on the ground. When I sat down there beside the place where he had thrown it, I picked it all up and thought, maybe this will come in handy. So I put it in my pocket, all these pieces of bills. See? So when they were feeding us and we ran out of money, I said, that was a friend of mine. I said, we shared one another. So I said, this thing is we think we can't get no tea or sugar or any buns. And then I said, I got a $50 bill. Where? I says, I got it, but it's all torn up in the jigsaw. So I brought it all out, and we got a white sheet of paper, and we got it from one guy that had a writing pad, and so we tore this piece of white paper and we put this thing to see if it was all together, and we got the whole thing was there. So then we went over to the cookhouse, and my brother was working in that cookhouse, and I said, would you take this, when they cook the rice, on the up, all that starch and that with the water runs up there. I said, would you scrape some off and put it in this jar for me? I says, I need some glue. So sure enough, he got me this stuff on, and we pasted over it, and we fit this here $50 bill on this piece of white paper, and we got it all on. And we squashed it, put it down, we put it in the all stuck, good and solid. And then we folded it up so the other white side would be on the inside. See, and we folded it all up with this $50 bill, and we took it over to the fence. We didn't know whether it was going to work or not. See, so took it over to the fence, and big tray of buns. And I said, how much? And he told me how much it was. And I said, when I give him a $50 bill, I want him to give me change for the $50 bill. So when he gives me the $50 bill, and I give him it, you grab those buns in a hurry and pull them through the fence, and I'll hand him that after I get the change from him, and I'll hand him the $50 bill, and then. So we did it. We got it done, and we ran and got the buns. And we still had money to buy some other stuff. And he's yelling, the Chinaman is yelling his head off. He's yelling his head off that he got gypped, and the sentry come over in the corner. I heard this shot going. He had shot at us. The sentry had shot at us, and we ran around the corner. He caught. We went out after and looked just above our heads. The thing we shot at us. So anyway, we got this done. The next day we went over to the fence and spent the rest of the money and got some tea and some sugar. And when we found out that they'd give us sugar, but they only give us about that much sugar in the can, the Chinaman had put that much sugar in the can, and the rest was we had paid him. So they were gypping us while we were gypping them. And so then they told us that no more Chinese wasn't going to be allowed to come to the camp anymore. And so they cut it off, all the selling that the Chinese, and so then they started just feeding us rice, and that's when we got the.
Can you talk about that, Gordon? About how much would you have got
So
for food in a day on average?
We got a very little rice, about a can about like that, scooped into steam rice and put it on a dish, whatever we were eating it from. And most of us didn't have any utensils, so we had a piece of shingle or something that we could pick it up with and eat. Then some guys knew how to make chopsticks, so they made chopsticks for us out of a piece of wood, and then we were all eating our food with chopsticks. So that was made in the camp by somebody that was making them, and so then we were just eating, and it was getting rusty and different things. We had to eat our food out of that. All we had was that's all you got was just that little scoop of rice like that, and nothing more. No vegetables. You got one in the morning, about when we were in Hong Kong, we got one in the morning, one at noon, and one at night, and that's all we got to eat was just that rice. And most of us was getting. We were hungry all the time, and the bed bugs was terrible. They just so then we went. Then in 1943 they took us to. They said they were going to take us to Japan. Everybody's got to work, so they said better for you to work. So. They took a bunch from our camp that went to Hong Kong, but I had been in the so I just got out, and when they were making this here bunch up to go to Japan, and my two brothers they lined us all up, and doctor from India was the one that was picking us out to go to Japan, and everybody that is healthy and good, they were going to Japan. Other ones that was weak and sick, they couldn't go to Japan because everybody's got to work in Japan. They lined us up, and they were saying this one can go over, this one can go, and this one can go, and they come to me and the Chinese, the Indian doctor looked at me, and then he went like this, and he said, "You can't go." And he said, "You just come out, just had malaria." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "No, can go." So he sent me over to the Japanese, put me over in another place. So then I seen my two brothers was going to Japan, and I said, "I want to go." I went to my sergeant and that was in the camp, and I told him I wanted to go, and they finally got me to talk to the camp commandant of the Japanese, and I went to him and I said, I want to go with my brothers to Japan." "No, you can't go. You're sick. You're too sick to go to Japan." And I said, "Well, I'm not sick. I'm better now, and I want to stay with my brothers." And he said, "No can go." And you, no way I could talk him into letting me go. See? So my brother said, "Well, we'll see you later. We'll see you later." And 15th of September to Japan. And so they said, some of the officers said, "We'll give you a job to do here in the camp. The padre needs a person to make his bed and that, and for the padre, and there'll be English padre and all the three padres, and you look after them and do what they want done. So I was working with them, and there was another guy that was working with the other ones, some other ones, and so we kind of got together because we were living near them, so they could get a hold of us, and the two of us was batting for the Padres. So anyway, they came over. The planes came over to bomb Hong Kong. The Americans came over to bomb Hong Kong. We heard the sirens go and that they're going to bomb, and we watched them drop these bombs, and they're going to hit the oil tanks across the bay. On the other side of the bay, there was a big bay that come in by our camp, and they were going to cross that way, and you could see them. The bombs leave the plane way out the other side of our camp, and they come right over our, like they were falling, and they fall this way. They don't go straight down, they go sideways. And so it's going across our camp, over our camp, and then they hit this tanks over there, and one of them hit right on top of this tank, and the whole tank shot up in the air, and it was just a beautiful sight. The battery says, "Get out of there! Get out of there! You're going to drop a bomb right here if you don't get out of there." They're yelling, and here they're crouched down under the table and that. And I went to crawl under the table, and then here they were both under the table. I couldn't get under because they were both there. And so it was kind of funny to see these bombs, how they went and how they blew these things up. And I see one I guess it was a Japanese guy or something. But anyway, I seen him when they dropped one bomb. I seen him flying up in the air. He stretched out like this. You could see the whole thing going on right across the bay because there was nothing there to stop you from seeing it. And I was right down close by it because that's where their was. I think they were told. I seen this here one this show that they put on. It was made for this bombing of Hong Kong, and they said, "Don't drop any on the other side of the prisoners of war, Canadian prisoners of war is in the camp there." So they knew, the Americans knew that the Canadian prisoners of war was in a camp next to where they were bombing.
Gordon, you were saying that you didn't do much work except on the airport for work when you're there, but
yeah.
So how are you, like, what's going on in the camp during that time? Like, how are you treated by the guards? And I know your food is very not good, but
some of the guys got friendly with some of the guards and I got cigarettes from them and that, and then they'd trade the cigarettes. Cigarettes was money in the camp. Cigarettes was money. If you smoked and if you got hold of some cigarettes, rich. And this one guy, he was like I guess he was in civilian life he'd been a criminal or something, and he was a shyster really, and he had lots of cigarettes because he got people to sell their watch to him, or Ronson lighters, because the Japanese wanted the Ronson lighters. They wanted watches, wristwatches from America, and of course they wanted them to say, well, we got we got all this American stuff, and they'd say trade cigarettes for it. See? So he'd get quite a few cigarettes for a watch, quite a few cigarettes for a ring, and of course people was trying to get something to eat and something more to eat, so they traded everything that they had. And if you had lots of stuff, you were all right because you could trade it in to him because he was the kind of the bargain guy. And so I traded I traded one thing, I forget what it was, but I traded two of them. I think I got 3 cigarettes from him. I said, 3 cigarettes is not enough. I said, I should get a whole package for that. No way. He said, he was really a shyster. He didn't give you what the thing value was to what he was getting from the Japanese for it. He got to know a couple of sentries, see, and he would talk to them over the fence. And
would the Japanese just take something if they saw it? Would the guards, if they saw you had a watch, could they just take it?
oh, yes, some of them did, yeah.
Okay.
Some of them just took it, yeah. But he got different things for the camp that you couldn't get. That he would ask the sentry, I'll give you this if you can bring me this, you know. And of course the sentry would get it when he was off duty. He would get it and then he'd bring it in to the things there. That you could talk to some of them some of them talked a little English, you know, some of the sentries, but most of them didn't talk a stitch of English. But you could get them to understand. I mean, the ordinary one couldn't talk to a sentry because you wouldn't have a chance to, but this guy seemed to have a little pull where he kind of did these things with the sentry. He ate good. He got extra food, canned food, and that from these the sentries that he traded stuff for to the sentry. And of course the sentry did it behind the back of his higher ups. He probably got shot if he got caught doing it with a prisoner, or even communicating with a prisoner. But some of the sentries was just as much of a cook as what this guy was. So
43, and you've been, like, what was the morale? How did people keep their morale up? And then
have the will to live, actually. You had to have the will, and it's going to be over pretty soon. We had the idea that it's going to be over pretty soon. It's not going to be that long. And you thought that that's what it was. You thought that you were going to be out soon. And then everybody started to get really hungry, so they started recipes. And one guy would say, well, my mother used to make this, and we really loved it, and it went like this, and this recipe, and then it went on to this one, and the other guy give it to this one, and everybody, I think everybody in the camp had a recipe book of things that their mother made. And so everybody traded it. And I will give yours to you if you give me yours. And it was a trading deal of, you had to have something to do. Then there was some books in there. I never read in my life very much. But in the camp, the guy gave me a book. He said, how would you like to read a good book? He says, it's called Tobacco Road. And I said, yeah, I'd like to read it. What it's about. He said, about the Depression in the States. And so I read the book of Tobacco Road. When I come back home, here it was on a movie. And Henry Fonda played in it, in Tobacco Road. And I read that book, and I read about 3 or 4 other books that was wrote of good books that I can't remember the name of them. I remember Tobacco Road though, because I thought that was thrilling. It was like what we had when I was young so I kind of liked that Tobacco Road. So I read the whole book right through, and then another one I read, and I liked it, but I can't remember what the name of it was now. But it was a good book too. And I read about 3 books while I was in the camp, and then I played a lot of cards in the camp that we, like I had picked up a deck of cards when I went into that there, what's it called, I thought, well, this might come in handy, this deck of cards. So I had a deck of cards, and everybody wanted to play cards. So a lot of people played. We played rummy, and maybe 10 people in the group that was playing rummy, and then talking about different things that they did when they were younger, and you had a conversation. So everybody was talking while you were playing cards. Then I learned to play whist too, and then and the bidding. I didn't like bidding on the whist. I hated the bidding. I couldn't understand what the other guy had in his hand, because they were supposed to tell you a certain thing with the bidding, so as you knew what to bid when he talked to you and made his bid. And I could never understand that, what they were doing. So I turned around. I know in Hong Kong, when we were in Jamaica, we played cards and things. This one time I got paid. I got picked up my paycheck, and in the morning, and they had a pay parade, and I got my money in the morning, and I'm laying on the bed. I'm waiting for so when we could go out that night, and the guys are playing dice on the floor, where my bed was. And some of the guys went broke and left, and it was getting pretty small down there. So they said, "Come on, play." I said, "I don't know the game. I don't want to play it." I said, "I don't know." "Well, we'll teach it to you. Come on, come on." Of course, I'm 17 years old, and I'm not that bright. And I get down there on the floor, and they told me that you do this and you do that. Well, 20 minutes later, I'm flat broke. They got all my money. Then I got to tell my two brothers, I got no money. We were going out tonight. "Oh, I got no money. I can't go out. I got no money." "Where's your money? You got paid this morning." "I lost it in the card game." "You stupid fool. You shouldn't play. You don't know how to play dice. They talked you into it." Of course, I get dummy thing that I did.
But in Hong Kong, Gordon, a certain group that looked after each other, or did you mix with a lot of people?
I had one guy that was really friendly with me. We got together. He was a Hong Kong volunteer. He was in the English Army, and he quit. And he had this girlfriend that he lived with, or his wife. I don't know if he got married or not. I'm not sure whether he got married, but she used to come every Thursday. She could come in and bring stuff into him. And he said, "Gordon," he said, "what is mine is yours." He said, "We'll share alike." He said, I used to go and visit him at his hut, and he used to come over, and we used to talk and that. And we got quite friendly, and then he said, my wife, he used to call her my wife, but she came into the camp, and he said, "You're going to meet her," and I met her in the camp. So anyway, we had so many different things happen to us in seeing and that, because malnutrition was starting to get to us. So we didn't have the to do too much because of what food we were getting and that. And at night, our feet was burning at night and that. And my brother's away on that there one, and I figured, well, again until the end of the war. But then they said in December the 15th, they said that another bunch is going to Japan. And they lined us all up again and said there's another bunch going to Japan. So they they lined us up, and of course I got on the bunch that was going to Japan. So we were taken down to this ship, and we were put on the floor, and our knees was put up to our chin, and we were in rows. There was rows here, and a row there, and a row there, and it was all in rows of us with our knees up to our chin, and that's the way we sailed to Japan, in the whole of this freighter. And it was just, you were just crowded there. If you had to go to the bathroom, you had to walk across between in there to get through. They had to move to let you put your foot on the floor, and they had to pull over, and they, you don't need to go in there, yelling, you know, and so you're going. Not very often did you go, because it was too much problem to go. And then you went across, and then you had to go up the steps to get to the top. Then you have to sit on the rail. There's no bathroom to go to. You just sit on the rail, or else if you wanted to water, you watered over the side of the ship. And the ship is moving, and you're sitting on this rail, and you're holding on to this rail if you had to go to the bathroom, really. And the Japanese laughing at you, sitting there, the sailors of the ship, and all the ones that's on the ship, they're laughing and thinking it's a big joke. And then one guy smoking a cigarette, and after he gets a couple of drags off it, you're there on the side of this. You go to take it, he drops it on the floor and steps on it, and funny, and then they all start laughing. Another guy has got a can of your Red Cross parcel. He's got a can of a stew or something with meat in it, and the vegetables, and he's taking a spoon, and he's holding this up, and know that you would like to have it. And he takes some and he puts it in his mouth, and he goes, "Pfft!" And then he takes it and he said, "Ugh!" And he hands it to you, and just as you go to take it from him, he throws it over the side of the ship.
Did you see any Red Cross? Did you ever get any
No.
Red Cross parcels?
We got it once in the camp in Hong Kong. We got some new ones come into the camp, and they put it in the warehouse. But one Christmas, they one Red Cross parcel to 11 men. One Red Cross parcel was for one man, but you had 11 men on it. One Red Cross parcel. So you got 1/11 of everything that was in that Red Cross parcel. So what we decided was, you take the chocolate, you take the can of bully beef, you take the can of stew, you take the cheese, you take the butter. Everybody got something that was big and if there wasn't enough, then you split it and said, all right, we'll half this, you get this half, and you get this half. See, so 11 men that was on that parcel, you had to spread it out even, so each one got the same portion of it. And that's what you got one Christmas, was 11 on a parcel, and it wasn't very much. It wasn't too much at all that you got, but we thought, well, we're hungry. At least it's something more than what we were getting before. But anyway, we got on this ship when we went to Japan. So it was coming Christmas time, so they slowed it up, and they stopped one night at Christmas time, and you could hear them celebrating up on the deck. The Japanese were celebrating, and you could hear that it was set down in the hole, and that's all. Then the next day the ship started to move again, and then it come New Year's, and they stopped at another place. Christmas as much as they do New Year's. And then the ship I stayed there for a couple of days, and just in the dock. At this, it was in Japan, but it was one of the first parts that we went near Japan. And they kind of left, when they left Hong Kong, they kind of went close to the shore of China, so as to stay away from where the Americans could have bombed the ship or that, and they were afraid maybe that the ship would get torpedoed or something from a plane that was carrying torpedoes. And so they kept it in close to the shore to take us to Japan, and going up from Hong Kong to Japan is quite a long trip, especially in the fair, and you stop for about 3 days, 2 days in New Year's. We finally got to the destination. Kobe was where we stopped the ship, and they lined us all up in a line, then had us number off, and then they come to me, and they split me, and they said, that bunch get on that train and this bunch get on that train, see? So I go with this bunch and get on the train. When we travel for, I think, on the train. And then when we got there, we seen these guys that had left, the guys that come down they'd sent from the camp that they were in, down to the train to help our stuff back and take something back to the camp from the train. And when we seen them, they were black. They'd gone on the 15th of August. They'd gone to Japan, and they were black, coal black, and you could see black in the ears, black around their eyes, where they'd been working in coal. And they were skinny, really skinny from what they were when we were in Hong Kong. And one of them come up and grabbed the bag I was carrying and what I'd brought. I brought what I had brought from. But he grabbed it. He says, "I'll take it for you." And he said, "Your brother's sure going to be glad to see you." I said, "My brother's here." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Both Boris and Phil's here." He says, "They're going to be glad to see you." And I was just so lucky that they split me here, and I went to their camp. And this one, I don't know where they ended up, but they could have went to a lot of different camps. So I had the guy that was batting with me in the padre, and as soon as he come up to me and he seen these guys that was black and dirty, and that, he said, "Gordon, I'm not going to last a month in this camp." He said, "What did they do to those people? They must have beat them. They must have made them work hard." He says, "I'm not going to last long in this camp." He says, they look terrible to what they did when they left Hong Kong. So I said, "Oh, go on." I said, "You got to have the will to live. You got to say, you got to live. You don't want to die." And I said, "If you give up, you'll die." So he turned around and sure enough, 3 weeks later, I buried the guy. They asked me to go out to take this guy out to the where they burnt them. They put them in they wheeled them in on the rollers, and then they had the fire there, and they cremated them right there. And died 3 weeks later than when we got to Japan. He gave up. He gave up. Absolutely gave up. He just said, "I can't stand." He said, "I'm not going to live." And that's the way it was. You had to have the will to live. If you didn't have the will to live, you'd die. Winters was bad in Japan. Very. And we had to march down to where the factory was. The factory was a nickel mine. And the coal was to heat the things up. They burnt the coal in the factory to get this ore out of the rocks that they brought in from the mountain. They're tearing the mountain down to get the rock, and they're mining this nickel. It was a nickel mine, and they're mining this nickel, and there wasn't very much ore in it, I don't think. Everybody said there was very little. Different people said there was very little nickel in the stuff, but they were doing it because they got to get it for their war effort. So they had us doing this stuff. So we had these cars was about. They weren't big cars like you have on a CPR. They were small cars. They would be about, as big as from half of this room, not as big as across here to that way. It would be a little smaller than that. And
like
you had to fill it up with coal. Two guys filling one car up with coal, and you had to shovel it onto the car from this here pile, and then then you had to push. When every one of the cars, there was maybe 15 cars in a string, and everybody had to push this thing up to where the engine could hook onto it. The engine couldn't come down because the track was too small to there, so it had to be up on top of the rise where we ate. It was a big long place where we went up and had lunch. When we had lunch, which we went up to push these cars up there, and it was a heavy push to get them up there. It was a long way, quite a long ways. It would be about from here to those buildings over there where you had to push it and to get the engine to hook onto it. Well, then when the car's back, he would race down from where the thing was and push these cars down, and then let them go where he pushed them down as they could to us, where we were down by where we got the coal. See, so he would shunt them. My brother was running the engine because he had done thrashing. He worked on the thrashing machine. He worked on the farm, and so they had put him on the engine to run the engine, to take the engine down. So he would shunt them down to us with the engine, see. We would run out of this pile of coal. Coal was used, and we loaded it. So they would move the track over to the next. They would cut the track off here where it come down, and hook it onto this one to bring it down to here, see. So we had a switch up here that switched it from this one, see. This one was cut off. There was no track going down here to it because we'd use that coal. So they would bring that track over on this side to do another pile of coal, because they had maybe 15 piles of coal that they brought in on barges from somewhere where they were coal mining. So there was probably prisoners of war and other prisoners of war that was working at the coal mine, digging the coal out in the first place. So anyway, because they had Koreans there too, working on different things.
Are you the only Canadians, or is there British?
It was Canadians and I think British to Japan or not. I'm not sure.
But in your camp or in your area, is there
But
any?
ours
is there
was
any-
Canadian. Ours was all Canadian, and they had some Americans there, but I never seen the Americans go out to work. I never did. I don't know. Maybe they went somewhere else. But we went as Canadians to this. We were working on this here, this factory, and so we would push when they cut the track off, and they put this here switch on it. So when we went past this switch, pushing these cars up, another guy would undo it a little bit more. Then another guy would pull the switch over. So as the switch didn't, when he shutted these cars down, they wouldn't go down this track, they'd go on the one that was dead. See? And this one time they pushed this car down and they come down, and we got the thing switched over to that one instead of this one. See? So the cars come down. The first one come off where there was no track. Hit the ground, and of course they all piled up, wheels flew off, and oh, it was one heck of a mess, big pile of junk. Then we'd have about 3 or 4 days putting these carts back together. See, so we didn't work. We didn't shovel no coal. We put the cars back together, see. One guy didn't want to do any more work for the Japanese, so when they shunted 2 cars down, stuck his hand in and smashed all his hands.
But did you mean they deliberately tried to make an accident with those cars?
Oh yeah, they tried to stop the production that they were doing with that factory. See, and as long as you could do something. And that one guy was telling me that in one of the places they bombed the Americans bombed it, but they couldn't hit this one warehouse that was loaded with stuff. So they built a little fire in there and then lit it when the planes come over to bomb, they lit a little fire in there and burnt the factory, and the Japanese figured that the bombs had hit the factory, but they couldn't get in there to get a bomb to drop. It burnt the factory so as to help hold up the thing. And we did lots of different things to hold them up. One time they were going to try and wreck the engine, so the engine couldn't run, and knocked the engine off on the railroad track. I stuck a bar in and tried to kid it so as it would hit the bar, knock it, but I got caught. I got caught putting the bar in, and the Jap swung and hit me on the chin here and knocked me out, knocked me cold, and then he couldn't tell. He got mad, see, and he was up on top, and he come down when I was shoving this thing in. It was in between a big cut on the track, and I got hit with a rifle with a butt. He swung his rifle, hit me here and cut me here, knocked me cold. Then he told that I was running down the track to catch up to the rest of them, and I tripped and fell on the track and knocked myself out. Because they would have shot him, because he wasn't supposed to hit. Sentry wasn't supposed to hit you, see. So he was just so riled up when he seen me doing it that he forgot himself and hit me with his rifle. And then after he had to tell the big ones that I had fallen, so then they pampered me. they were giving me, he was going away. The sentry told me I run, fell, hurt myself, and so they were giving me cigarettes. The Japanese gave me cigarettes because I had fallen and hurt myself.
How many hours a day would you have been working when you're doing? How many hours a day would they make you work?
You went to work at. You got up at At 4, you had something, breakfast at 5. Then you went out and stood on, get ready to go to work. You went to work at 6 o'clock. And you worked from then until noon. And then afternoon, you worked until 6 o'clock at night. Marched back to the camp. And then you got your meal, your night meal about 8 o'clock. And that went on every day. Then I went, they took us out to they took a bunch of us out to this, one day, they took a bunch of us out to this here factory, where the factory was, and the flat car that they have on the railroad, that the sides could go down, and it was loaded with potash, or they load these ones with potash, and you see them going down the track, and the sides will fall down so they can shovel it off. Well, they brought these big cars in to the factory that come from the mine where they were mining this stuff, and they took us over this one day to shovel this stuff off the cars. And I had my rice about 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was on this car with another guy. He was at the other end and I was at this end, and I was shoveling this stuff off of making it run down into this pit. And all of a sudden I got dizzy, and things started to whirl like that, and the next thing I knew, they had me on the stretcher up there, and I was covered with this dirt that we were shoveling into the thing. And I had passed out, and I hit where I was shoveling, and I'd rolled into the pit, and I'd fallen down, and there was bars across to hold the building. They had them this way and this way to hold the building so that it wouldn't push out when they put the ore into it, and they filled it up with ore. And I had fallen down, and we just started shoveling. See, the stuff down in the pit, and it was all along, they were shoveling it all along the place. I had fallen down into the pit, and I wrapped around. This guy said, boy, he said, when you went down there, he said, that bar, he said, you landed on your back. And you bent around, your head touched your feet. And he talked to me after he come over to the hospital where I was laying, and he said, I thought you were dead. He said, I really thought you had died. He said, because you hit that bar, and he said, you just wrapped around it, he said, on your back. And he said, boy, he said, I thought you were dead. He said, because you fell off of there and you never moved. Then they went into the side door and put a couple of sacks, rice sacks, on two big long poles, and they laid me on that and took me up to the top, and then we went into camp. They took me into camp on the stretcher. And when I got in there, they put me on this wooden floor bed well, it wasn't a hospital. It was just a place where the sick was in this place, and they laid me on there, and the Japanese big shots was in there, the doctors and that, and they put sandbags on my feet so as my feet wouldn't move, and then the sandbags on the side of me, and that's where I laid. I laid there for a long time, months, never moved. They'd bring my food to me and feed me a little bit of rice right there in the food, and I was there for a long time. Then one day this come in, and a bunch of officers from the Japanese, everybody gotta get up, everybody gotta work in Japan, everybody up, get them up, get them up. They were yelling all over the place. And they said, can't get up, you can't get up, you can't even walk. Get them up, get them up. So they got two guys and got me up, and I was bent right over, and I couldn't even feel my feet. Couldn't feel my feet. I'd been laying there for months. Couldn't feel that I had any feet. But they dragged me around, and make 'em walk. And finally they got me off, and finally I got where they let go of me, and I was bent over, and I could just shuffle along because it hurt. And I couldn't straighten right up. And then the Japanese come, he says, "I have to go to work." And they got one of the sergeants said, "He can't work. What's he gonna do? He's bent over, he can't do no shoveling." Him get stick. And you got the stick and put a piece of chalk on and tied it on with some wire. He said, "You go." He said, "Railroad, bad type, very rotten." He said, "You go." Okay. So I said, "That's what you do." So there was 7 of us was put on the railroad working. That they put us 7 with this guy to have anything to do with it. He was Japanese, but he was a civilian, and they put him into the army, or into doing things with that. He was the guy that was in charge of fixing the railroad, bad ties and track and that. And there was 7 of us worked on that crew, and I was the one that had to mark the bad tie, and then they would come along, take the tie out, and put a new one in. And all I did was mark the tie. I didn't do any lifting or anything. They made sure that I didn't have to do anything like that. And so I was mostly up the track a little bit ahead of the guys that was working. But this guy that was in charge of us, he was one of the nicest Japanese I ever met in my life. He would, every morning, he would have a sweet potato about this, and he'd have it cooked in the coals of his fire. He had a little fire there, and he'd put these 7 from his own garden and bring them to work, and he'd cook them. And when we came in, he'd tell us to put it in our pocket. But we could, as we walk along the track, we could eat this potato. He said, you get very little meshy. You get very little meshy, so he said, you eat potato, sweet potato, very good. You eat potato. And then he'd give us, each of us, he'd take a package of his own cigarettes, and he'd give each of us 1 cigarette. He said, all day, you smoke a little bit, 2 drugs, then later on you take another. All day you use that cigarette. And he gave us 1 cigarette every day. When we came in, he'd give us a sweet potato and 1 cigarette. And he'd say, war, no good. War, no good. No good war. He'd say, don't want war. I don't want war. He says, you guys get very little to eat. Can't work if you don't get enough to eat. Can't work.
Where were you staying, Gordon? Like, would they have been like barracks or buildings or huts?
Yeah, we were in huts. We were in huts, but it was the bed bugs. The bed bugs, we probably brought some in our clothes, but then we got lice. We got lice, and the lice ate the bed bug. The lice didn't like bed bugs, so but they were just as bad because they got in under the seam of your clothes, and they bit a lot more, and you scratched, and you couldn't kill them because you had to squeeze them between your two to break them. They go pop when you squeezed them, pop, and they were full of blood too, as bad as bed bugs, but there was no more bed bugs. Then when we went into the camp, we got they ate the lice. And every once in a while when we had the lice, they would get us to take our clothes off and they would boil them to kill all the lice. But once you, and this one guy that was, they had an inspection to see if you had any bugs on you. And this guy had them all over. He had them down here, and he had them up in here in his hair, and he was sleeping right beside me, and I never caught none of them. I didn't have them warm.